looks like the majority of you are saying, you know what, I'm going to go with, I'm against year-round schooling. So what we need to do is we need to, hopefully this works out, we need to start creating an outline. So what I want you to do is I want you to write out your thesis statement, whatever that may be. But we know that we need to include Taylor County Board of Education, right? Okay. What is the wording here? I'm abbreviating just to get through. It's not yours. All right, so Taylor County Board of Education should or should not establish year-round schooling. Since we do not have it already in our county, we have to go with one of these positions. We figured that out from yesterday. Jot this down. Create your thesis statement.
With our 3 supporting things?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
Don't take my thunder.
So, okay.
I'm going to leave a little space when I start to outline this essay because we know that we need to come up and add something. Eventually, we're going to add this word because, and we're going to have 3 reasons. We may not know what they are yet. We may have to reread and make sure that we have a firm grasp on those. But we do know that there are 3 reasons coming. Okay, so what we need to do is we know that everybody in here is going to say that they should not establish year-round schooling. So what we have to do now is try to find what kind of support we have for that. So let's brainstorm a little bit, and where did we find textual support? So now I'm looking for the article letter. So source A, source B, source C, source D.
In source B, it says that studies have been inconclusive to its academic benefits.
Okay. So inconclusive is what source B says. What other sources argue against year-round schooling? Source A, and what do we have in it? What's like the overall idea in source A saying no year-round schooling? Okay, no positive impact. Let's just go in order. Anything in source C? Yeah. What do we have in there that could give us something arguable?
The devils, the demons.
Okay. Okay, referring to it as being similar, if we went year-round schooling, similar as being you know where. Okay, source D, does it have anything arguing? Yes?
It says that opponents say it has a high cost and inconsistent.
Okay, inconsistent research, which is kind of the same as B, but the big takeaway there is what? The high cost. Okay, and anything in source E?
Well, I mean, there's numbers.
There's a lot going on in
For
there.
the number,
For the traditional enrollment, for the total cost, for 2 of them, it is lower than the year-round enrollment.
Okay, so once again, cost lower for traditional. Okay. And then for F, what did we find out in there? What's the reasoning? We know it's against, but what's the reasoning? Say again? Structure? To make it happen. It was against year-round schooling, right, F?
No, wait,
No, it was, F was 4. She was talking about the
That's
kids
what I'm
with
saying,
special
that-
needs, that they need the structure.
Oh, for some reason I thought it was, okay. So we don't have an F that's fighting for our cause, right?
No.
All right, so we're not gonna even list it.
Mark that one out.
Mark it out. Okay. Here is our ideas that we're pulling from in regards to looking at what we've pulled together. Oh, geez. Okay, there we go. Oh, my.
I think everything can be flipped back.
Would that work? What?
But
I know, it's perfect. Yeah, I think it's perfect.
It is.
Okay, so what we have to decide is what are our three arguable points. So we know that we have three arguable points. You can start looking over here because holistically we have this idea. Okay, we know this one says inconclusive. We say no positive impact. We know that this is compared to being in Hades. We know this is inconsistent high cost. We know that this is cost. So the biggest thing that stands out for me would be cost. Okay. That could be my number one point. Once again, leave a little spacing here. I will post a photo of this when it's all done so it's not backward. Okay, and what are we thinking whenever we think about a second cause we could put in here? I think this is kind of strong. Do you think that's kind of strong?
C or D?
I'm sorry, the demons and the Hades?
Oh.
You guys can call it what you want to call it. If you want to call it the other place. And what could be a third arguable point that we want to say, no year-round schooling, because of what?
Not effective.
Yeah, I think this inconclusive and inconsistent can be kind of bundled together. The ends. Consistent. Oh my gosh. And what did I say? Inconclusive. And then whenever we start pairing, we know that if we're going to argue costs, we know that we can pull that from source E, right? And also source D. When we look at Hades, we know that straight up comes from source C. And we look at inconsistent and inconclusive, we know we have a B and a D going on there. All right, so let's start taking this idea and let's find these arguable points. So whenever we take a look at this and we're talking about cost. Now remember, we don't want to spin our wheels. We don't want to state, in our top, what we're doing is we're outlining now the topic paragraph. So what we don't want to do is say, yeah, costs are higher for year-round schooling. We've got that. We've made the claim. Second thing is we're going to put in the textual evidence. We're going to pull in and quote some information from D and E. The next thing is we have to argue that. So do we want to keep saying costs are high, costs are high, costs are high? We need to find an example. And if I remember correctly, one of the things it talked about was having a cost impact on what? Does anybody remember?
Cost
Wasn't
impact.
supplies or anything else? Mainly supplies.
Somewhere there's something in here about extracurricular activities. Which one?
There's something at band, right?
Yeah, that's why I was trying to find that one. Mine is so marked up, I'm having a hard time finding it.
Band and other extracurricular programs suffer from problems with scheduling out of school practice. Oh, never mind. That isn't. No, that isn't.
Where was it?
It was in
That was-
source B.
But that doesn't have
It
anything
doesn't have
to do with
to.
cost.
Yeah, I just thought of band.
Okay, but we can definitely put that underneath here of inconsistent and inclusive because the big deal is band and extracurriculars. So what I want to pause for a second and tell you, and this is going to blow your mind, and yes, you heard this from Miss Dalton. Because the prompt said you and your, you now have the privilege to use personal pronouns. I know it just blew your minds and I see the emoji mind-blowing thing. However, do we want you to my and I us to death?
No.
No, you're still going to argue this as if you're an authority. However, there's going to be moments where you're going to have to pause and consider, how do I bring this in specifically to my school? So think about the extracurriculars you're involved in. I know we have band. I know we have the volleyball and the basketball. I know we have entertainers. I know that we have track and running. What else do we have in here that I've overlooked that you guys personally know? Did I get it all? Of the extracurriculars you're involved in?
I like
Other
clubs.
sports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the sports ball and all those included, right? So do you see how you now have, you can make the statement that year-round schooling is inconsistent and that it's inconclusive because of extracurricular activities. For example, in band, if year-round schooling were to occur, then you give that example of what you know to be true of being involved in that extracurricular activity. If you're not in extracurricular activity, you probably have friends that are, and you've heard them say different things. I think that you have enough knowledge of extracurriculars to argue something. The idea here is to give it an example to back it up. Does that make sense? That way you're not spinning your wheel going, yeah, it's inconsistent and inconclusive. Yeah, we get that. Give me an example, because that's when I'm getting brought into your argument and I agree with you. And I'll go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, band. Okay, oh yeah, I can see the issues there. All right, let's look at some other things. So let's look at the idea of cost. What specifically can we bring in about this idea of cost to bring in an example?
So,
I will give you the number one. Where do we live?
West Virginia.
What do we know about the West Virginia?
not very.
Not very rich.
Okay. Poor.
Facts.
You guys live here, you know that. And I am not saying that you as individuals or you as your families are poor, but we do live in a poor state. And could you argue that? Absolutely. So here you go. You state the claim. The cost would be higher in year-round schooling. State your textual evidence. Source C and D. Next up. For example, Taylor County is located in West Virginia, which is one of the poorest states in the United States. Boom. Argue that fact home. What kind of an impact would that have? Think about that. You guys know that. You live here. You know what kind of impacts that would have if we had even more cuts within our schools and our school system. Does that give you some ideas for arguing? All right, next up, we have this idea that year-round schooling is being compared to being down under, and I don't mean Australia. So what is the big deal about being compared that way? Now we're dealing with something up here. We're dealing with the emotional impact, right? So we have to think, emotionally, what do we know to be true if you guys are so miserable about coming to school?
You won't want to go, and that will affect your performance because you don't want to do it. And if you don't want to do something, you're not going to do it well.
There you go. For example, if you don't want to go to school, you're not going to perform well, such as in whatever, insert whatever class, whatever dread that you have, okay? Whatever that you would have as an example here. With me so far?
Yeah, so we can use like how you're saying, like our personal experience, like in school.
Yes. You can use your personal experience, but remember, don't I am I the person of death. You can still state it with authority. You don't have to say,
Yeah.
in my school, say in Grafton High School. Like, still claim it and still own it. Okay, this is the moment I always hate dealing with AP students, because now all of a sudden you're like, whoa, she said personal pronouns. But remember, you can still argue it without throwing in all the I's and my's in every single paragraph. Make sense? I'm not saying stress yourself out about it if it comes down to it, but try not to I and my your reader to death. All right, we have this idea here of what it looks like. So the next thing is we have to consider, we have the outline, we have a thesis established, we know where to find it. The next thing is, how does it look? Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to stop this.